Hey everyone, my name is Josh and welcome back to your fourth stimulus package and news update. In today's update, we have a lot of news to get into, but first, if you would like to receive 5 free stocks from Webull valued up to $2,300, make sure to claim them by clicking my link, which you will find in the description box below. Okay, so on Wednesday, the Senate voted to pass the National Defense Authorization Act. In total, this annual defense bill came out to $768 billion and passed on an overwhelmingly bipartisan manner, with 88 voting to approve and 11 voting against it. Despite the Biden administration not approving the $25 billion increase to this year's defense bill, it is expected that the president will sign it into law. Here is the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, praising the bipartisan support just before the bill ended up passing.
Today, the Senate will pass this year's National Defense Authorization Act by a big bipartisan margin. I've talked for weeks about the importance of this legislation given the global threats and international challenges that face our country, from China to Russia to the fight against terrorists in the Middle East. I'll also be proud to vote for this bill because of the enormous impact it will have on my home state. The proud service members based in Kentucky play an outsized role in our national defense. From deploying across the world to fighting COVID-19 here at home, they do amazing work to keep America safe. In the past week, they've stepped up to provide critical support as Kentucky deals with the aftermath of our devastating tornadoes. Our Commonwealth's heroes and their families deserve our full support, and I'm proud that this year's National Defense Authorization Act delivers for them.
In some other news, according to NBC News and 4 sources familiar, after weeks of the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer claiming the Build Back Better bill would pass before Christmas, he's now about to push that deadline back until next year. Yes, due to the parliamentarian being slow to make rulings on certain measures, which will decide which policies meet the standards of the Byrd Rule, in addition to Joe Manchin holding out, this bill is going to get pushed back until next year. Instead of attempting to pass the Build Back Better bill before Christmas, they're now turning their focus to legislation surrounding the rights of voters. Being that Republicans have been unanimously opposed to these bills, they haven't gained enough votes, or at least the 60 that they would need in order for it to pass through. So because of that, Democrats are hoping to get Joe Manchin on board to get rid of the filibuster, something that would allow Democrats or Republicans to pass these types of bills with just a simple majority rather than needing 60 votes. So far, Manchin has been opposed to getting rid of the filibuster just because he supports bills being passed in a bipartisan manner, and also he knows at some point the Democrats will once again be in the minority, and Republicans will be able to pass these types of bills through as well, yes, with just a simple majority. Here is Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer saying that Republican-led state legislatures are destroying our democracy as far as our voting rights go.
We're also continuing to hold conversations as Senate Democrats on the urgent work of advancing the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. There is universal view in our caucus that we need to pass legislation to protect our democracy. What the Republican legislatures are doing on a purely partisan basis is undermining, destroying our democracy. We believe that we can restore the Senate to work the way it's supposed to, and at the same time deal with voting rights, and that's what we're aiming to do.
For a long time now, there has been widespread controversy over what should be required in order to cast a vote. For example, is it too much to ask someone to show a photo ID in order to vote on Election Day? Democrats claim, mostly, that states create rules which keep people from voting. Therefore, they would like the federal government to be able to oversee certain states' voting laws and change them if necessary. Republicans believe that showing identification is important for our election integrity to ensure the person is who they say they are, whereas Democrats believe it's a form of discrimination. Democrats believe that minorities may find it more difficult to get an ID, and therefore is discrimination. So we'll just have to wait and see where all this goes. In some other news, going back to the Build Back Better bill for just a moment, it was reported that things got just a little bit heated with Joe Manchin and reporters, where he told one of them, "You are BS," using the actual word, of course. A journalist for the Huffington Post reportedly pressed Manchin on a report that Manchin is against extending the child tax credit payments, where, in response, Manchin told him that he was BS. Of course, later on, Manchin did not deny that he wanted the child tax credit out of the Build Back Better bill. In fact, he told reporters that he's always been for the child tax credit. However, he would not comment on whether or not he wanted it to be included in the Build Back Better package, or perhaps in a separate bill where it could then be passed with bipartisan support. Also, according to some reports, these talks Manchin had been having with President Biden, well, they haven't been going all that well. The major sticking point, according to sources at least, is the child tax credit. Like I just mentioned, instead of having the extension of the child tax credit in the Build Back Better bill, instead, he would rather see it passed in a separate package, which would require at least 10 Republican votes. So, because of these talks going sour, negotiations between Manchin and Biden are likely to be pushed back until next year, just like Chuck Schumer's deadline, and we'll have to see whether anything changes over the next few weeks. Of course, with the last round of the monthly child tax credit payments being sent out yesterday, this was a huge priority for Democratic leaders. They really wanted to get this thing extended, so payments would then continue going out in January as well. And now that it looks like the Build Back Better bill won't pass before the Christmas deadline, the only other alternative, if possible, would be to extend them in a separate bill. When House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was asked about the possibility of Congress passing a standalone extension of the child tax credit, this is what she had to say.
If Democrats don't get Build Back Better finished soon, would you consider a standalone piece of legislation just for the child tax credit? Because you have a deadline where the IRS won't be able to send out January's payment on time this month.
Well, it's going to be going out today, this month.
January's payment.
You said this month.
They have said that they need it done by the
Well,
28th in order to make the payment.
Just a question of what, of course, we could pass that in the House. Whether we could pass it in the Senate remains to be seen. But I don't want to let anybody off the hook on the BBB to say, well, we covered that one thing, so now the pressure is off. I think that that is really important leverage in the discussion on BBB, that the children and their families will suffer without that payment. Not everybody gets it on a monthly basis, but those who need it the most do. And so we're just still optimistic about BBB passing, and perhaps even if it were after the first of the year, which I hope it is not, that it could be retroactive if it's early enough in the first of the year.
Pelosi says, I don't want to let anyone off the hook on Build Back Better by passing the child tax credit in a separate bill. Pelosi says families will suffer without the payment, and because of that, it's important leverage for her to use. So while many aspects of the Build Back Better bill hope to reduce the cost for families by including the child tax credit payments, universal pre-K, and funding for childcare, Republican Senator Tim Scott says the bill will actually increase the cost of childcare.
Thank you, Senator Burr, for leading this important press conference on an issue that is not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. It is simply an American issue. Imagine, if you will, households across the country, specifically those households in South Carolina, the one like I grew up in when I was a kid. Single-parent household waking up to the sense of desperation because your gas prices are up nearly 75%. So instead of spending less than $2 a gallon in 2020, you're now spending over $3.30 a gallon in 2021. Imagine, if you will, turning your heat up or likely turning your heat down to conserve money because your utilities are up 25%. And then you wake up to the BBB, as I call it, the Build Back Broker Plan, and you realize that the bone-crushing, life-changing, hope-stealing, job-killing aspects of the BBB includes increasing your child care costs, as Senator Burr said, by $13,000. But to understand the actual impact of that $13,000, you have to first understand that the current cost is over $15,000. So said in a way that everybody in our nation can understand, and with median income around $34,000, you take taxes out, the cost of child care is now more than your take-home pay. Literally providing child care for one kid is more than the take-home pay of the average income in our nation. And somehow we are to celebrate this notion that the government is here to do something for you, when in fact, you know the government is taking something from you. And what are they taking? Your hope? Your future? Your plans. And so while we may think of this as a exercise of political philosophy, one side versus the other, we may think of this as a red versus a blue. This is literally an attempt to fundamentally transform what it means to take care of your child in the place you want to send your child by eliminating options, increasing the cost, and stealing the hope from far too many families who deserve better from their government.
Meanwhile, if anyone thought Mitch McConnell would eventually give in and help Democrats pass the Build Back Better bill, so far they would have thought wrong. Here is Minority Leader McConnell with his new name for the bill, Build Back Beijing.
I described yesterday how inflation is hurting families all across our country. Since then, yet another key economic indicator has set an unfortunate record. In the last year, wholesale prices grew at their fastest pace on record. Anyone with a shred of sense knows this is the absolute wrong time to unleash a multi-trillion-dollar taxing and spending spree. Every single day brings new evidence our Democratic colleagues should give the country a break. But the cost of Washington Democrats' latest obsession isn't the only problem. The context of what they want to pass is actually just as bad. We've known since the start of COVID pandemic that Democrats saw it as an opportunity to transform American society. They've actually been quite candid about that. And the reckless taxing and spending spree they're riding behind closed doors is a Trojan horse to let the radical left dictate intimate details to American families. There's a long list of policies inspired by the authors of the Green New Deal, a whole slew of new programs and mandates aimed at fitting the entire country's systems for producing and consuming energy into sort of a California-shaped box. Special subsidies for expensive lifestyle choices like electric vehicles and electric bicycles. New red tape to strangle the most reliable and affordable sources of American industries, of American energy. Subsidies for supply chains that China dominates so that America borrows in order to build back Beijing. And don't forget the so-called civilian climate corps, just what we need at a time of inflation and labor shortages. A Potemkin make-work program for liberal activists. It only throws money at a subset of secular child care centers that woke bureaucrats happen to favor. Forget faith-based options. Forget flexible part-time arrangements. Forget being remotely fair to families with a parent at home. Democrats want to bring their inflation into child care and make daycare more expensive, more inflexible, and more unfair. And then there's the latest offensive in a long campaign to restrict more of America's health care choices. Democrats' plan would mean more one-size-fits-all programs, more government control, a wet blanket over the world-leading innovation pipeline that creates new cures, and a further gamble with seniors' Medicare when the trust fund is already in danger of insolvency. Then there are the massive tax hikes our colleagues want to use to cover the bill. All those radical changes, all those big government intrusions into family life compared with the crushing tax hikes that would hit our country like a ton of bricks. There are new surcharges on individual taxpayers. There are tax hikes for pass-through businesses. There's a brand new radical scheme to make American industries less competitive that Senate Democrats scribed down with no hearings or committee process. President Biden promised he wouldn't raise taxes 1 penny on anyone making less than $400,000. But experts agree that Democrats' tax hikes would break that promise People with far less income would be affected. So for goodness sake, in 2022, their bill would give a bigger percentage tax cut to people making more than $1 million every year than to families that pull in between $75,000 and $100,000. That's according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. The average person who makes upward of $1 million gets a bigger tax break from Democrats' bill than the average household that makes just under 6 figures.
In other news, the Federal Reserve announced on Wednesday that they're going to begin winding down their massive bond buying program as they hope to slow down some of the recent inflation taking place. After Treasury Chairman Jay Powell admitted that inflation has been higher and longer lasting than they initially anticipated, they decided it's finally time to begin more aggressively tapering down the Fed's bond buying program. Under the new timeline, the Fed will reduce Treasury bond purchases by $20 billion each month and mortgage bond purchases by $10 billion each month. Back in November, the central bank announced that it was tapering its monthly asset purchases, but now they say they will be doing it at a quicker pace. So with inflation running crazy, you can't really blame them, and the Fed hopes that these new policies will enable us to get our inflation back down to the normal annual rate of right around 2% per year. But on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. Again, if you would like to receive 5 free stocks from Webull, make sure to quickly claim them by clicking my link, which you will find in the description box below. To receive the first free stock, you will need to fully open an account. Then, to receive the 4 other free stocks, which will be valued up to $2,000, you'll need to make a qualifying deposit of at least $1. And even if you aren't all that interested in investing or continuing to invest at this point in time, you can always sell the free stocks you receive and transfer that money, however much those stocks are worth, right back to your bank account. So free stocks or free money is completely up to you. So once again, I hope that everyone has a great and safe rest of their day. If you did enjoy the content in today's video, I would greatly appreciate it if you would give this video a like, a big thumbs up. That does just definitely help out with the YouTube algorithm. And until next time, as always, I'll see you in the next video.